Welcome back to the Short Shifts Fantasy Hockey Podcast. I am your host, Ben Burnett. Joining me, as always, Louis Ezekiel. Louis, my friend, how are you doing this fine evening?
I am doing all right here, Ben. We are engaged in the hashtag Battle of the Buds this week.
No.
Oh, yes. So we are, locked in Mortal Kombat here. In the Caufield Tier 1, all the best to you this week, good sir.
The hardest part about this is that we're both doing terribly in the Caufield this year. My team dealing with the Kucherov injury and about 5 other injuries at any given time. Your team dealing with the Marner, McKinnon slow streaks. Of course, Marner now shoving it to my team. But I hope that we somehow both – I hope we tie, you know.
Yes, that would be an outstanding ending. Just for the sheer unlikeliness of the situation, I think it would be really awesome.
Yeah, I'm really hoping we're tied. My fingers are not even crossed a little bit right now. Everybody who is listening, thank you so much for tuning in. This is Short Shift, the twice weekly amuse-bouche to keep you posted between the 8-course meal that is the Keeping Karlsson mega show each and every Sunday night. Louis, we're going to hop right into it, and we need to talk about NHL Calder Trophy winner, 40-goal scorer, Cole Caufield. I don't know if it's my glasses are all fogged up or if I'm just reading incorrectly, but I saw a news headline today that Cole Caufield got sent down to the AHL, but he hasn't scored his 40 goals that I was promised he was going to score this year. Louis, yes. What is going on?
I'm sorry, that was Calder Cup, not Calder Trophy there, Ben.
Well, he was supposed to. No, you're misunderstanding. I'm saying he's obviously going to win the Calder Trophy and score 40 goals in the NHL this year. And so I don't understand why he's been sent down to now chase the Calder Cup because, he was a shoo-in for the Calder Trophy.
Yeah, a Calder Trophy, perhaps.
Sure. So the deal with Montreal, of course, is that nothing has really gone right over there. He wasn't doing much except for shooting in Montreal. His percentages were super low, so I do think that there was a little bit of luck going on there. Obviously, his confidence was not super ratcheted up. Hopefully, he can recapture some of that magic down in Laval, where he scored 3 goals in the 2 games he played there at the end of last season. This does, give him a chance to recapture that magic. Louis, if let's say Cole Caufield scores 8 goals in the next, 12 games or whatever, and the Habs call him back up around Christmas, are you rushing out to the waiver wire to pick him back up?
Yeah, I think I'd be happy to pick him up. What your question implies, though, I think is maybe the more important half of it, which is, should people be holding on to him or dropping him at this point? And you seem like you're very clearly in the drop him camp at this point.
Oh my God. Yeah. Sorry. Yes. Just to be clear, I guess I'm getting ahead of myself, but I don't see why you wouldn't have already dropped him, right?
Well, we have been getting the question quite a lot with a lot of people who are curious about that. And I think unless you are in a dynasty or a deep keeper, I'm with you. I'm not interested in holding on to someone who is, at best a question mark once he makes an undetermined return to the NHL, right? So I think if you're in a 1-year league, I think you need to just cut your losses and go out and grab someone interesting and exciting off the waiver wire, and, be tuned into the news and listen to, the Game Day News, Twitter account and see when Caufield is coming back up and certainly get after him and maybe even, jump the gun a little bit, maybe miss a game or 2 without him if you're really confident that he's going to be much improved. But yeah, I think that there's no reason you should be carrying him along in all but the deepest of 1-year leagues.
I don't even think I would be. I mean, yeah, I guess if there's like 30 people on your team or whatever, but yeah, it's hard to imagine carrying Cole Caufield.
Yeah, that's, it's unfortunate, but it's a very strange situation. Like they overachieved by so much last season that now that things are, it took a long time for the chickens to come home to roost, but here they are. And obviously those percentages that were buoying them all through that magical playoff run have disappeared at this point. And it's got to be tough for Caufield too, because he had a lot of success early on and now, it's been really difficult. So yeah, I think it makes sense, just like, Eklund going down or getting the scratch, rookies, need a little bit of this kind of work sometimes, and I hope it'll be beneficial for him in the long run. It is a little bit of a disappointment, I'm sure, for him that he was sent down just before this game against the Red Wings, where they're having a good deal of success here in the early going. But obviously that game has not wrapped yet, so we don't know exactly how that'll end up.
So, Lewis, you mentioned, you said, I think, if you're excited and you're bullish on Caufield, go out and grab him. But, I mean, people are listening to us. I think they want to know, are you bullish? Would you be running out to grab him?
I'm going to keep a careful eye on how he's doing, in this stint, as he gets sent down. I think I would be interested in taking a flyer on him, especially, my team, as you know, is kind of studs and duds set up. I wanted to spend money on a few key players and then sort of fill things in. So I've got lots of space where I've got players that, really are in there because of their schedule. And if you are also in that position, obviously you don't have as much of a studs and duds approach if you're not doing an auction. But even still, if you've got a lot of replacement level players, I think you should be keeping a keen eye on Caufield, because what if he does come back up and make a big splash? I think you'll be very happy that you went after him. So I'll keep a close eye on him. And certainly if I have somebody who's just kicking around my lineup because they played 4 games in the previous week, but they've got 2 coming up and were never that good to begin with, I think I'm going to jump on that.
It sounds like you're saying that you would be picking him up if you weren't really if you were struggling and you needed a boost on your team. I think I'm in the opposite boat. I would be looking for Caufield when he comes back up. If my team is cruising, and I think that there's a chance that he will pick things up as time goes on. But I just don't see how you could trust him coming back, or add him if you need to maximize every roster slot, because
Sure.
We've already seen the downside. We've seen what'll happen if he doesn't get much playing time. And yeah, I just don't have a ton of faith. But let's move on, Lewis. Let's go over to Colorado, where Cale Makar is now out through the weekend. Sam Girard likely to get 2 shots at the top power play in Colorado this week at least. Here's the interesting thing, Lewis. When I saw the Cale Makar news, as I'm sure many folks did, went out to see if Sam Girard was available on my fantasy hockey waiver wires, but I stopped myself from adding him in a couple spots, in particular the Cupful, where you and I are competing against one another. The reason being these friggin' Colorado Avalanche schedules. They play 6 times between now and week 6. It's only 2 games each of week 4, 5, and 6. So I think, there are some leagues where it's definitely worth going to grab Sam Girard. I'm a little bit nervous to do so, though, in some of my more competitive leagues where I feel like I can't really afford to give up the games played that it would require.
Yeah, definitely. If you're trying to maximize that space, and especially with defensemen, you're counting on volume, and volume of games counts just as much as volume of time out there. And, the Avalanche have not, it's another kind of a repeat of the last couple of years. They've really had trouble getting that kind of, those top 6, all put together with their top defensemen, the 5 players on that elite power play, kind of all playing at the same time. And it just hasn't come together yet. And I think it'll be great when it does. But yeah, it's been a real challenge for them to put the kind of team out there that they would like to have. And it's been very problematic, for the stars on that team, the ones who have been injured and out, and the ones who have been in while the others have been injured and out. And it's been really tough, I think, for people who drafted Darcy Kemper thinking that he might be, a top 5 goalie. He hasn't shown that to us yet. But I think, part of it is we were assuming that Colorado would cruise to a lot of pretty easy victories, and it has been much more of a challenge, much more adversity than we have seen, maybe than we expected, up to this point. So yeah, I think that's tough. I've got Kadri and McKinnon. Obviously, McKinnon's not going anywhere. Kadri has been playing really well. I know Brian and Elon talked about him on the last pod, and I think I'll keep him around. But yeah, it's tough, only because I have, such a dreadful sort of bottom of the lineup that I'm cycling through. I would rather have 2 games of Kadri than 4 games of Chris Tierney.
All right, well, let's hop over to Vegas, where I'd say the other big injury news today, William Karlsson out for 6 weeks with a broken foot. adding to that increasingly large VGK injured reserve. Max Pacioretty, Mark Stone out indefinitely. Karlsson had just 3 points in 8 games played so far this year, but this is still a bummer because the team has already been struggling to be productive offensively with 2/3 of its top line out. Now they lose their best centerman. Vegas 26th in goals for this year. I can't imagine that losing Wild Bill really helps that. The only forward that's really been doing much of anything this year is Chandler Stevenson. He has 9 points in 8 games. He's seen an extra 2 minutes in ice time with all the injuries over in Vegas, but he really isn't shooting much more, still just 1.5 shots per games played, and he has 4 goals on 12 shots this year. So obviously there's going to be a coming back down to earth for Chandler. Otherwise, everyone's just been bad. And I can't say that I'm particularly excited to see Brett Howden moving up to line 1 to center Marchessault and Riley. On line 2, you have Peyton Krebs playing with Stevenson and William Carrier. And then on line 3, you have Dodonov, Roy, and Kolasar. This is kind of the opposite of a rising tide situation, right? A lowering tide messes up every single boat. I'm not sure how long Chandler Stevenson can keep up his torrid pace so far. I'm probably not dropping him right away. Unfortunately, though, he's got all of those. He doesn't really do shots. He doesn't really hit. So if he hits a snag and he doesn't produce for a few games, I think it's going to be pretty tough to hold on to him with all those zeros. I would still want Marchessault most of the Vegas forwards, despite Stevenson's hot start. And he's worth holding. But other than that, I'm pretty much probably staying completely away from Vegas Golden Knights, no matter who jumps up in the top power play with Karlsson out. It looks like a bit of a clown show right now.
Yeah, it's been really brutal. And, you hope at least, they've got those stalwarts on the blue line. Shea Theodore had a situation where they were on a power play and they won the faceoff back to him and he took it out of the zone and then brought it back in offsides and he was immediately pulled from the power play with everyone else staying on the ice and replaced with Pietrangelo. It's just been really ugly. They're getting stomped by Toronto. Robin Lehner, obviously, having a tough go of things, trying to keep them in the game early, but has allowed a couple more. So yeah, it, like you said, the whatever the opposite of the rising tide lifts all boats. The receding tide drags everyone out to sea and drowns them. It's really bad out in Vegas right now. So I'm with you. I do think there's a couple people worth kind of hanging on to who obviously, you think are going to get a lot of run. I might check the lines though. I forget who it was, but somebody on Twitter was talking about, there's all this consternation about the Vegas lines that they rolled out. Think of them like 4 third lines, and they're basically going to roll them all more or less equally. So I'm interested to see if that turns out to be the case or who they're kind of relying on during this time. But, obviously there's like deployment out there in terms of ice time, but man, it's not like anybody's getting hooked up with a nice, setup in terms of, who else is on their line. It's just really grim.
So you mentioned that you would still be holding on to a few folks who stand out to you.
Like you mentioned.
I mentioned. Oh, you're saying Marchessault. You're not saying anyone else.
No, I'm just agreeing with you. Yeah, I'm not digging up anybody else that I think is worth holding on to. One thing that is interesting is we've heard, and of course we've heard this before, but that there may be some movement on the Jack Eichel front. And, this has been on and off, and some talk about Vegas, some talk about maybe Anaheim now that they've got some players on injured reserve. Obviously, we don't want to jump to any conclusions, but just a reminder that people getting excited about a potential Eichel trade here, you're still going to be hanging on for a long time, right? The 2 surgery options are a 12-week recovery for fusion surgery and the disc replacement that Eichel wants, which has been a point of contention with the Sabres. That has a shorter recovery week at 8 to 10 weeks. But, even if we're assuming a trade is completed, say, in the next 2 weeks and surgery is scheduled a week after the ink dries, you're looking at a return sometime in February or March at the absolute earliest. I think whether we see him at all, I think is still very much in question. It would, I think, depend in a lot of ways on how the Knights are doing and what their playoff chances look like. I'm pretty confident they'll be able to rebound from where they're at right now and be okay, especially once their stars return. But the Pacific does not seem like the super easy division that they would just ride roughshod over the way we thought they were.
Honestly,
right? I
think they might have some issues. Obviously, if they get back to full health, you would probably expect them to approach stability, but I think this is the sort of, we've seen this type of season where everything that can go wrong continues to go wrong from a lot of teams before, and I think there are reasons to be nervous about, even Robin Lehner as a starting goalie. We thought that was going to be kind of a tap in for him, but there's reasons to be concerned.
Yeah, absolutely.
We are going to take a quick break. When we come back, we will chat about a couple of hot streaks and a cold streak. You're listening to Short Shifts. Welcome back to Short Shifts. Lewis, why don't you take us out to Calgary?
Yeah, so obviously Calgary has been a surprisingly excellent place, although I got to give credit where it's due. Brian talked in the preseason about Calgary maybe putting together a nice season. Someone that has been flying off of waiver wires is Rasmus Andersson, so we want to talk about him a little bit in terms of his value. 4 points in the last 4 games, 3 of them on the power play. He's been at least 46% of the power play for the last 4 games and was over 4 minutes with a power play assist and an even strength assist against Philadelphia in their most recent game. He already went from 20% to 33% rostered on Yahoo from Monday to Tuesday. And I like to see him spending 80% of his even strength time on ice with Hanifin. I think that's a good partner for him, who can provide him with some defensive stability and let him be a little bit more offensive. The pair have 9 goals for and only 1 goal against at even strength, which is nice. They're driving 54% of the shot attempts. And you've even got him killing about 35% of penalty minutes, which gives him a chance to earn a few blocks for our multi-cat leagues or points leagues that count them. This is not an elite option on defense. I think despite the success of the Flames power play, they're not relying hugely on their defensemen. They haven't really for a while now, at least the last couple seasons. And he's not shooting much, only a shot a game. But he is widely available. He's a defenseman who's pacing for 61 points, and he's playing behind an offense that's off to a great start. If you get credit for power play points in your league, especially, I'd have no problem swapping him in to replace Karlsson while his status is up in the air regarding COVID, especially because Karlsson's had, maybe overperformed so far on the power play. And so Andersson might give you a little bit more stability there, even if he might lack a little bit of the flash and some of the shooting. So that's when I think that is interesting.
You're going to drop? Did you say you would drop Karlsson?
Swapping him in to replace him while he's, a good replacement option, if you're trying to replace him there. I don't think I'm ready to swap him yet, but I think they're, after looking at the numbers, they're closer than I anticipated, considering them, early on.
Yeah, I think that the best thing going for Andersson this year, we all kind of wrote him off because people expected Hanifin to take that top power play. But the nicest thing for him is that there really is no other heir apparent in Calgary. I know a lot of folks carried a torch for Juuso Välimäki, but there's been no indication that the Flames see him as a top power play option. And now we have Rasmus Andersson just sort of humming along. I wouldn't be surprised to see the Flames struggle. They're outscoring their expected goals on the power play, and Andersson has not been a particularly dominant 5-on-5 scorer. So I do think that there will be some lulls. There will be some rough patches here for Andersson owners, but for now, while he's hot, this is exactly when you want him on your team, and I have no issues with picking him up in most leagues.
Yeah, especially if you're in a league where like Nate Schmidt was a hot commodity when he had his little hot run with the Jets. I think Andersson is going to be, I know he was very streaky last season, and, defensemen tend to be streaky, especially if they have, a bunch of points here. If they're pacing for, 50 points, they're going to have plenty of games in there where they don't score, and sometimes they all come in a run. But I would definitely think of him as a much more stable option than Schmidt, who, was riding some unsustainable numbers to that recent hot run of success.
All right, Lewis, why don't you tell us about our cold streak for tonight?
Oh, boy. Yeah. This was a bit disappointing. Luckily, this wasn't a guy that was going as high as he has in the past, but what is the deal with Anders Lee? He's getting all the deployment you could ask for. Line 1, power play 1. This was a guy that was drafted 155 overall, drafted in 84% of Yahoo leagues, and yet he managed a goal in game 1 and not a peep from this guy since. Lots of people asking if this is a guy we should be worried about or if they should hold on and wait for regression with his prime deployment. I think the scariest thing about Lee right now is his shot volume. Typically, this is a guy you would rely on for at least 2 shots a game, along with a hit and about, a 55-ish point pace. But with 6 games done so far this season, he's averaging just 1.8 shots a game. And that number is deceptive because it's really propped up by one game versus Columbus that featured 6 shots. And in every other game that he's played, the other 5 games, he's only taken 1 shot in each of them. His individual shots per 60 minutes is at the lowest rate of his career. The hits are on their typical pace, but they've also been coming in fits and starts. 2, then 0, then 3, then 0, then 4, then 0. So maybe we'll see 5 in this next one and then 0 in the next 2 games. But, if he's not hitting, he's giving you, whatever your shot is worth and nothing else. So there's a bit of hope. As I looked at his points participation, the only goal that he's factored into was the one that he scored. So his points participation is only at 20%, but he's never really been a key part of setting up plays, much more of a trigger man. So a regression to his usual 60 to 65 participation rate would only factor into a couple more assists. And it's not like the Isles are shooting particularly poorly overall while he's out there. He's enjoying the highest on-ice shooting percent of his career outside of a 2-game sample, his super rookie year in 2012-2013. So you got to ask yourself if you would be any less panicky about a half point per game Anders Lee with a crummy shot rate, with a goal and 2 assists. I'm a sucker for a guy with great deployment, and 6 games isn't a huge sample size. The Isles have yet to play this week. They'll play Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. So it probably is worth it to hold on to him through Sunday, but the Isles play only 1 game next week against the Devils on Thursday. I don't think I could stomach holding Lee over that week if things don't improve dramatically in these games versus Montreal, Winnipeg, and Minnesota. What do you think? Is that a guy that you could?
I wouldn't be holding him now because I would have dropped him last week for his 1 game week. In week 3, I think that he's a snoozer. He's a drop. I'm with you.
Yeah, you want to see those shots rebound before anything else. And if you can get back to shooting like his old self, and your league gives credit for that, I think if you're in points only, you probably didn't draft him in the first place, but certainly let him go now. And yeah, with that 1 game week coming up, I think it's time to say bye-bye to Anders Lee.
Yeah, I think Brian and Elon covered this 2 weeks ago before the week 3 schedule for New York that had just 1 game. And basically we're saying, like, if it's not nailed down to Matt Barzal, just probably just, or one of those goaltenders, specifically Sorokin, I guess, probably you're good to cut bait. And that's pretty much how I feel about most players on the Isle.
Yeah, I'm with you there. It's just has not been a very exciting offense, and that's sort of what you've come to expect at this point.
All right, Lewis, why don't you take us out of here?
All right. Well, thank you, as always, for joining us. We're so pleased that you have chosen to download and listen to our show. Please give us a follow at Short Shifts KK. You can follow Brian and Elon at Keeping Carlson. Dave Benton of the Stream Scheme is at NHL Stream Scheme. Please visit and patronize the great sites where we research our episodes at Yahoo, Frozen Tools, Natural Stat Trick, and CookHupful.com. Our intro and outro music was created by Pat Roach. And until we see you next time, play smart and keep your shifts short.